once government takes power, it's going to abuse it, and it will never relinquish it.
So this is my weird obsession, warm, fuzzy socks, because I feel like then everybody chills out. This isn't a normal TV set, right? Are you willing or no? Are you going to take the dive on a pair of socks?
No, I mean,
There's some fun choices.
I have chronically hot feet, so I go barefoot whenever.
You do?
Yeah, I'm happy to take my shoes off, but I'd probably go barefoot rather than put on the socks.
Well, I won't force you.
I got in trouble, in this campaign for going barefoot on an airplane.
Give me a break.
Oh, that was a big scandal so far.
Yeah, well, listen, if that's the worst scandal, we're okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to, full transparency here, because why not? First of all, my mission in my second chapter of my career/life is about the human beings and people, not necessarily your resume, or if you're an athlete, your statistics, or even policies, because to me, like it starts here. So I want to preface with that because I want to get to some of the political things, frankly, and the topics and the issues that are so important towards the end. But this to me is, it starts with when people say, okay, when you vote, some people vote with such emotion. And quite often because I think we tie ourselves to a candidate based on their morals and values and the human side. And then I found, my goodness, like half these people are terrible human beings, So forget it. If I focus on that, then I'm not going to vote for anybody. So I'll just stick with the policy. That's just easier and safer, and that's what will help our country and make our country better. However, you're here, and I am dying to get to know a little bit more about the human being. That's where it all starts. That's where it ends, right? Everything else is in the middle. That said, when you think back on your entire life and going back to even your childhood, when did you know that you were different? That you were a Kennedy? Like that's royalty, as that word has probably been thrown around so much your whole life. But it's a different childhood than mine, for sure, as an Army kid,
Yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky to have the childhood that I did. There was a lot of love in my family. I grew up in a very, very big family. When I was 6 years old when my uncle was elected president. I went to the convention. It was the first time that I had stayed up all night in Los Angeles. I flew back on the plane next to my uncle, and there's these wonderful pictures of me talking to him as a 6-year-old boy. He sent me a copy of one of those pictures where he's listening intently to me as I kind of gesticulate. And he said a president gets his advice from many different people. But the campaign there was absorbed our lives.
Yeah.
And when he was elected, it was, our house became a summer White House at the Cape, and then the house that I grew up in Virginia, my father was the Attorney General. And on Friday afternoons, 3 helicopters landed on the football field next to our lawn. My grandfather had a big football field where all the kids, where his kids grew up playing, and 3 Marine helicopters would land, and all of my uncles. My uncle Steve Smith was the chief of staff. My uncle Sarge Shriver was the head of the Peace Corps. My uncle Ted Kennedy was in the Senate already by that time. My father was the Attorney General, and then my Uncle Jack was the president, and they would all get off those airplanes. They would go up onto the porch of my grandfather's house and kiss him. And he was almost the first year after my uncle was elected, he had a stroke that kept him in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And then they'd come up every Friday, they'd stay for the weekend, and then they'd fly off on Sundays. And they'd bring with them very exciting house guests, and it was just tremendous excitement in our family. And then, of course, my uncle was killed in 1963. That was devastating for my family. My father was shattered by that, and it took him some time to recover. But by 1964, he was back on his feet again, and he ran for United States Senate. And my father, during that period, went through a kind of, I would say, a psychic realignment as he tried to make sense, because he had this very kind of, I would say, black and white view that, that if you behaved well, if you did the right thing, that God was going to take care of you and you would have a good life. And that when his brother was killed, all of those notions, those simplistic notions about how the universe functions, were shattered.
Yeah.
My father gave me a book about 2 weeks before he died called The Plague by Camus. And my father said, when he handed me this book, he gave it to me with a particular intensity, and he said, I want you to read this. So after he died, and I was trying to make my own sense of the world and my relationship with him, I read that book several times to try to kind of discern what lock that key would open. And the book is about a doctor in a plague-ridden city in North Africa that is under quarantine. And you don't even ever learn what the plague is, and they don't really know. They just know it's killing huge numbers of people and that it's extremely contagious. And most of the book takes place a conversation by a doctor who is locked in his apartment and is trying to make a decision about whether to go out and help people. And he has no idea how to treat this plague. Nobody does. Everybody seems to be dying. He understands that if he stays in his apartment, he's likely to live. If he leaves to help people, he's highly likely to die. And in the end, he makes the decision to go out and to console people, even if he can't save them, because that's his duty, that's his function. What the Stoic philosophy was, it was that all of us has a duty to subject ourselves to intense self-examination, our motives, to move away passions, prejudices, and try to make the determination of what ethical conduct is in every situation. What is the next right thing? No matter how it costs you, no matter whether the world condemns you, if once you determine what is the ethical path, you march that path no matter what. And
but you're a kid when so much had taken place, so many heavy things, traumas had taken place, and so your uncle and then your father. I mean, were you even able at such a young age to start to self-reflect and examine how you were going to handle the one thing you can control, right? Your reaction. I mean, you were...
Yeah, I mean, no, I would say no, I was not in any condition to do that. And, what I ended up doing is within a year after my dad's death, I was addicted to heroin. Yeah. So that was kind of... And I'm not saying that that's what caused my addiction, in many ways, I believe that I was born an addict. I had that, I feel like I was born with empty spaces inside of me that my inclination was to fill with things that were outside of me.
So born with that, and then you
I
add
feel
on.
that way, but who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? And I've been in recovery for 40 years. So I go to a meeting every day. And
every day?
Every day. And I hear people, I hear people's stories every day. And if you go to those meetings, half the people think that they were born with addiction. Half of them think they acquired it. And it may be that they're genetic. There's probably genetic codes that provide vulnerabilities, but that, the way that we're nurtured, the way that that we walk through the landscapes of life also may change our behavior in various ways. What we do know is that once you become an addict, you can never go back. You're now an addict for life.
Rather.
And that, you have to do something else besides just say, I'm not going to be, once you're a pickle, you can't go back to being a cucumber.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's acquired or whether it is natal is kind of irrelevant. And I can't tell you for me, I can tell you that, again, within a year of my dad's death, I was doing drugs, and I was addicted for 14 years. So I quit when I was 28 years old, and during that period, when I was in early recovery, is when all of these things started to make sense to me, and all of the books that I had read, my Catholic upbringing, all of this confluence of philosophy and theology and self-examination and pain that you go through.
Mm-hmm.
We grow through pain. Pain is ultimately the touchstone of spiritual growth. And addicts have a unique opportunity for redemption because they've been to hell. And I was able, during that period, I was lucky enough to be able to synthesize a lot of these lessons that I'd learned that were probably incoherent to me earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
But they all started falling together when I was in recovery.
I wish that first of all, I've never been an addict myself, but one of the people in my life that I love the most, a family member, well, like you said, once an addict, always an addict. But he also was a heroin addict for about a decade. I don't know that.
And then what happened?
And then he made a choice. He made a decision to.
So he went into recovery.
He did go into recovery, and he's doing well. I think that unless you have done it or know someone close to you that's been through that in particular, especially with heroin, there's no way to fully comprehend the hell that you were in.
I think most people these days, unfortunately, do know somebody who is struggling with addiction.
I totally agree, yes. But I think to fully understand by someone who is part of me, what it does to your, yes, physically, but your core, your soul. That to me is like one of the few drugs that it's shocking to me that so many, it's actually not a huge number, are able to overcome heroin in particular because of the addictive qualities of it. We know what it does. What was your low point during those 14 years? That is a hell of a long time to be struggling with that drug in particular. Was there one low point?
No, I mean, everybody who's addicted goes through various kind of stages of pain and humiliation, and so all of those things happen to me. But a lot of it was fun. I mean,
it's a party.
And I mean, for me, when I was a kid, I think I was born with ADHD, and back then they weren't diagnosing it. You were just, but I was, I was bouncing off walls, and I did so poorly at school. I found some report cards about, 10 years ago when my mom sold Hickory Hill, which was a house that I grew up in, and we all ended up sort of getting our high school papers and all that stuff back. And I was reading my elementary school report cards, and they were, literally one of the priests said, he is not only the worst student in this class, he's the worst student I've ever had. And I know why, because I was completely non-compos mentis. It was just like, I feel like I was a dog, when you're talking to a dog and they know their name, but nothing else. I could hear the kind of blah, blah, blah. But I was thinking all the time, how do I get out of this classroom and get into the woods and, turning over rocks and catching snakes? That's the only thing that I wanted to do, and climbing trees. And as soon as the bell rang, I was off into the woods with my brothers.
By the way, did you ever know the teachers thought that about you? Was that hidden from you
Oh, yeah,
until then?
no, I knew I was a problem student, but
Those are strong words, though.
when I started taking heroin, I went from the worst kid in my class to the first, second, and third academically in my class for the rest of my career.
What?
Because it calmed me down. It made me so that I could sit still, which I could not sit still. My brain was in turmoil all the time. And I had, I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't sit still and read. And all of a sudden, so I feel like I was self-medicating. And back then they didn't give you Adderall and stuff. And it was my Adderall. I was, I could sit, I could write, I could read, I could comprehend. I had, and I was functional on it.
So you felt smarter on heroin. It was a fun party.
Yeah.
Like it's 14 years. So why stop?
Well, that's the thing is it does. If it kept working, I'd still be doing it. But it not only stops working, and of course you need more and more of it to work, but also it destroys your life and it destroys your relationships and it hurts everybody that you love and it makes you into a liar and it forces whenever you're living against conscience, which you're doing if you're addicted, you push God over the periphery of your horizon. So there is a complete disconnection and you become, I feel like I was like a one-dimensional human being. That I was a collection of appetites that needed to be fed all the time, and that becomes a full-time job. There was, all of these needs that I had, whether they were sex or drugs or alcohol or extreme behavior or whatever, and that they were constantly demanding to be fed, and that was my full-time occupation, and it's very, very time-consuming. And there's no time for self-reflection. I mean, there's no authentic self-reflection.
Right.
You can still have big thoughts and you can, perform intellectually. And I could try cases and, graduate law school and get all jobs because I was not, I wasn't like nodding out, drug addict, but I was on
high functioning. I mean,
I was pretty high functioning and, but it was destroying my life. And I was, like I said, I was a one-dimensional person. And when I finally got sober, I came in, with my life wrecked and I came in on my knees and I made the decision. I knew I needed a spiritual realignment. I did not want to be back when I was arrested in 1983 in September. Everybody now knew I was a drug addict. So I could now go get help. Because before that, I was not going to go into a 12-step meeting. And
did you want to, but you were afraid that...
I did. I tried constantly to stop. I tried earnestly, sincerely, honestly to stop. The most demoralizing feature of addiction for me was my incapacity to keep contracts with myself. Oh, I would tell myself at 9 o'clock in the morning, I am never going to do that again. And by the way, I had iron willpower in other parts of my life. And I gave up candy for Lent when I was 13. I never ate candy again until I was in college. I gave up desserts when I was 14, and I never ate another dessert till I was a freshman. I was doing sport, I was playing rugby.
Can you help me with that? Like, it's my biggest struggle in life. I have to have dessert 3 times a day. That's amazing. So in that aspect, you're able to do it,
I
but
felt
not...
like I had iron willpower. I could do anything with my willpower, but somehow this compulsion, this one compulsion was completely impervious to any act of will that I had against it. I would tell myself at 9 in the morning, I'm never going to do that again. And I would believe it and be committed to it. And at 4 o'clock, I'd be doing it. And the guy I was at 9 o'clock had no capacity to bind that person that I was going to be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And that is completely demoralizing. So, so when I did get arrested, I now had the opportunity to go do things. Because of my name, I was not going to walk into a 12-step meeting full of strangers
Right.
and say I'm a drug addict. It just would have been it would have seemed suicidal to do that, because anytime I shared anything with anybody, it would get in the papers. So I wasn't going to do that. But now I could do it, and I knew I was very, let's say, purposeful and intentional. I wanted to stop. I was determined I would never take any drug again, and but I didn't want to be out on the street, like wanting to take drugs and then white knuckling it and struggling against the impulse. I wanted to be the kind of person who would who would wake up in the morning and just never be thinking of drugs,
Yeah.
and kiss my wife, hug the kids, go to work, have just a normal life, and not be thinking about drugs all the time. I didn't want to be that person.
Did that arrest save you then? I mean, it
Well,
sounds like that was
yeah.
your turning point.
But over, in the 40 years since then, I've brought many people into recovery, and then, tried to recruit many more who didn't come and who died or are still out there. A couple of times people have said to me, "Oh, I don't want to go to that program because it's going to brainwash me." And at this point in my life, if somebody had said, "You can go to a place and get brainwashed so that you'll never want to take drugs again," I would have said, "Bring it on." My brain needed washing, and I wanted it. I wanted this alignment. Now, I knew, because we read the lives of the saints every night, and I knew that, particularly with some of my favorite saints, they were people who had led these very debauched lives. Like St. Francis of Assisi was, kind of a rake and a drinker and a party guy until, he had his moment of conversion. And St. Augustine was, was what they would call in that era a whoremonger. He was living in a bordello. He was drinking. His mother was Saint Monica, for whom Santa Monica is his name. She prayed for him for 30 years, and then he had this sudden conversion. He didn't want to take. He didn't want any of that anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't a daily struggle for them after that. They just had changed who they were at this. It had these profound spiritual realignments. And I had a friend who was the best friend of my little brother, David. And David died of this disease. And this kid used to take drugs the same way that I did and that David did, with injecting heroin and cocaine and all these drugs, and with the same enthusiasm and compulsion. But he became a Mooney. He joined the Unification Church, and he became a follower of Reverend Sun Myung Moon. And he didn't want to take drugs anymore after that. And he would still hang out with us, but he would just chatter about his newfound revelations and his, new religion. And we could take drugs right from it. He just didn't want them. He was completely. And I used to think about him when I was in, when I first got sober, and I would say, this is what I'd say to myself then, which was very judgmental. I'm going to tell you now, but I would say I'd rather be dead than be a Mooney. But I wish there was some way that I could distill whatever power that gave him, that made him impervious to this compulsion, without becoming a religious nuisance. And then I picked up this book by Carl Jung called Synchronicity, and it was a kind of synchronicity that it was sitting on a table. And the reason I picked it up was because there was an album by The Police that had just been released, and it had the same name, and I didn't know what the word was. So I picked it up out of curiosity. And synchronicity is a coincidence. It's like one of those things that happens to all of us when we start noticing them. It happens more often. But like, if an example would be you're talking about somebody who you haven't seen or thought about in 20 years. and the phone rings and it's that person on the phone. And these little things happen to us all the time, right? And Jung saw those as those incidents as interventions by God who would reach through, the universe and break all of his own rules, the rules of mathematics, arithmetic, of percentages, of chance, of biology, and of time and space, would reach through and do these little things to touch us on the shoulder and kind of say, I'm here. You're looking at a miracle. And Jung tells a story in that book where he's sitting he ran the biggest sanitarium in Europe. It was in Zurich. And and by the way, Jung was one of the fathers of psychiatry. He had been, Freud was his mentor. But Freud was an atheist, avowed atheist, whereas Jung was a deeply spiritual man. Jung began having these very authentic spiritual experiences when he was a kid. And he has another book. I wouldn't recommend anybody read the book Synchronicity, but his book, which is called Memories, Dreams, and something else, but it's his biography that he wrote when he was, I think, 85, is riveting. And, he remembers the dreams that he had. And these synchronicities, other authentic spiritual experiences that kind of guided his life in this extraordinary way. His father was a preacher, and his father was very good at what he did in terms of being able to recite the sort of consensual orthodoxies of the time, but he never had any authentic spiritual experience. It was all dry to him. He was good at articulating it and inspiring people, but he never felt it himself, and he died. At the end of his life, he died miserable, and he had lost his faith. And Jung, the whole time, who was having these real experiences, was always trying to communicate with him, but his father kept him away. Anyway, Jung had this experience, which he describes in this book, where he is sitting in a room with a patient. He has his back to the window. The patient, a female patient, sitting on a couch, and the patient is talking about a dream she had. And the centerpiece of that dream is a scarab beetle. And a scarab beetle is a creature that's very common in Southern Europe and Northern Africa. It's a very common symbol of iconography and hieroglyphics on the tombs in Egypt, on the obelisks, etc. And this beetle was the fulcrum of her dream. So while he's talking to her, Jung hears this bing, 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 bing on the window behind him, and he doesn't want to. It's irritating him, but he doesn't want to look around and see what it is because he doesn't want to take his attention off the patient. He's scared of breaking this, bond that he has with her. But finally, he gets exasperated, and he turns around. He throws up in the window, and a scarab beetle flies in and lands in his palm. And he turns to her and he said, "Is this what you were dreaming about?" And those kind of things happen to him a lot. And they happen to all of us, right?
Sure.
But the chances of that happening are 1 in a trillion, right? But nevertheless, it happened. It violates all the laws of, nature. So Jung tried to reproduce this phenomena in a clinical setting. So he would put one guy in one room and another guy in another room, and he'd have them flip cards. And he would then try to get them to guess what the other guy had flipped. And he believed that if he could beat the laws of percentages, that he would have proven the existence of a supernatural law, something that was beyond natural law, beyond nature, beyond anything that we could explain with mathematics, percentage, etc. He never succeeds in doing it. And he says that in this book. What he says is that I can't use empirical tools and scientific tools to prove the existence of a God, but that I can prove that, having seen tens of thousands of patients come through his hospital, that people who believe in God get better faster and that their recovery is more durable and enduring. And for me, reading that was much more impactful than if he had said that he had proven the existence of a God, which I would not have believed.
Right. Not at that point.
What he was saying was, it's irrelevant if there's a God up there or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in one, your chances of living a healthier life and of recovery are better. And it's an easier path. And at that point in my life, I had made a vow that I would do anything at all, if it increased my chance of recovery by even 1%.
Mm-hmm.
So I made an intellectual decision. I'm going to start believing in God. Now, I was raised.
You were raised Catholic. I mean, every day.
But when you live against conscience, you push, any kind of notion of God, as I said, over the periphery of your horizon. So, God, I never disbelieved it. I never renounced my belief, but it was no longer part of my, sort of daily cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I made a decision. I'm going to start believing in God because it's going to improve my chance of recovery. And then I'm confronted with the dilemma of, how do you start believing in something that you can't see or smell or touch or taste or hear or acquire with your senses? And Jung solves that problem by saying, fake it till you make it, act as if. And he said, the compliance, the faith, will precede the evidence, that there will be evidence that will be overwhelming.
When did you stop faking it? When did you fully believe that?
I'll tell you what happened to me. I immediately, while I was reading this book, I said, okay, this is the answer. So I'm just going to start pretending there's a God up there, that he's looking at me all the time, he or she. I don't care. I doubt they have a sex. It has a sex. But it's an entity that's looking at me all the time. And that life is kind of a test, and that, we're supposed to do the right thing, and I'm supposed to behave myself even when I don't have an audience, so even when nobody's watching me. So I started breaking my day down into a series of decisions that now, about 40 decisions each day now, each one has a moral implication. So when the alarm goes off in the morning, do I get immediately out of bed, or do I stay in bed with my indolent thoughts for another 20 minutes? Do I hang the towel up after I take a shower? Do I make my bed? It's the most important thing. I sleep in hotels nowadays because I'm in a different city every day. But I make my bed every morning, and which is insane.
In a hotel.
But yeah, in a hotel. But I do it anyway because I'm doing it because it's a character exercise. It's, and we're here not to build a pile for ourselves. Whoever dies with the most stuff wins. We're here to build character, which is the only thing that's enduring. So now I'm able to make commitments to myself and keep them, right? Even when I don't, even when I don't want to do it.
Can I ask you about that in particular? Because as a man of faith, and I think, and as a fellow practicing Catholic, we kind of take this path, right? And it is certainly up and down, and believe or not, and question or not question. And specifically, the Kennedys, we know, devout Catholics. When it comes to marriage, that's something that obviously we talked earlier. Lovely Cheryl, wife number 3. How have you handled that internally with your faith as a Catholic? And again, I'm divorced. I'm asking this a genuine question as someone who is a practicing Catholic and had some tough decisions to make, wondering, would God be mad at me? Like, what does all this mean?
Yeah,
How have you handled that with now
the suicide of my?
I'm talking just the divorce, all of that. But in this particular question, when we take it's a covenant of marriage, and you vows, and we decide this is for life, and then it's not, and you're married now for the 3rd time. How, as a Catholic, do you balance that in your mind and in your heart?
My relationship with God belongs to me, and it doesn't belong to, I don't have to report to, a priest or or my Catholic faith.
Well, I know, but and that, like, I'm sharing that I had that internal struggle because of what I know that we believe. So was there that internal struggle with you when your first marriage ended, for example, because of how we're supposed to do things? It's one and done, and then we say, okay, we're not going to continue with this. Did you have the internal struggle?
But for me, in my first marriage, my wife is an amazing person.
Mm-hmm.
She was my, best friend who I married. And today we're close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, we did not belong married.
Mm-hmm.
And neither of us were happy in it. But I would have stuck with it, for these, I think, what I consider
Right.
moral reasons at that time. I would have just done a forced march. And she actually had the sense to say, this is not working. I don't want to do it anymore. And at that point, I was freed because it was her choice. But she had made the right choice. And, I don't have any, I feel like you have to make your own peace with God. You find people in your life who are, the important thing in life is to not have any secrets. That doesn't mean not to have secrets. That doesn't mean that everybody you meet, you tell everything
Sure.
you did.
Yeah.
It means there needs to be at least one person in your life who knows everything about you and who you have no secrets from. And, hopefully a spiritual advisor, somebody who's wise. The word wisdom means the knowledge of God's will. And somebody that you can help examine your own conduct, because we all have blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you something that happened to me.
But can I? Was there a moment of? Did you have to forgive yourself for these failed marriages, especially because of your commitment to Catholicism and your faith in the church, or was it just, hey, I know what's right and what's wrong?
Once I know what's right, I can do it without any
aside
kind of remorse.
from what we're told to believe as Catholics.
Yeah, but and that may be a contributor.
Mm-hmm.
The wisdom of the ages, but why life is complicated, morality is complicated, and I think it was Augustine who said, who was asked about right and wrong, and he said, good is what the good person does, because in some instances there is no clear cut. At some point, it may be permissible to steal, even though the Bible says don't steal. But if you're stealing from a bad person to feed a child who's already died,
right? I also believe that God, and this is something that I've thought for many things. I believe God knows our hearts and doesn't want someone living unhappily, whether it's as a couple. So that's where the balance comes in, right?
Well, all of us are required. If you want, Augustine said the unexamined life is not worth living. So, part of the adventure that we're put down here to enjoy is self-examination and rigorous, ruthless self-examination. And you can't do that alone. You need help from somebody else. And so we all, and I'll give you an example of this. When I first got sober, I had a number of people who said to me, you got a lot of anger. And I was like, I wanted to punch him in the nose, because I was like, I don't have any anger. I'm like a peacemaker. In my family, an Irish family, there's fist fights every day, but I was the peacemaker. I felt like I was the kind of guy that, if NASA was recruiting people for a long space ride and they needed everybody to get along, for decades in a little tiny capsule, that I'd be the kind of guy they recruit, because I can get along with people. I didn't think of myself as an angry person, and then I went to take a Rorschach test, which is an ink blot test, and what they do with those ink blot tests is they have a blot of ink that is just this incoherent form. But you're supposed to say the first thing that comes to your mind when you see it. And that is supposed to reveal something about, something that you can't see in yourself. to help who's ever giving you the test understand you, because we deceive ourselves. The first thing that they showed me looked like two semicircles on either side of the crease of the paper where they'd folded the paper. And the first thing that came into my head was a memory of something I saw at the Army Medical Museum in Washington, D.C., which is part of the Smithsonian, when I was a little boy. And in that museum, they had a room where they have parts of human bodies of soldiers who've been shot or injured by shrapnel, suffered shrapnel injuries during the war, and they have a leg in one jar. They have, it's a really sort of morbid room, but it's the kind of thing that a young teenage, kid would, love to go and see. So they had a cross section of a human brain that was preserved in lucite, in a slab of lucite, and there was a seared path of a bullet going through the brain. Ugh. And this figure they showed me looked like the crease of the paper was that seared path of a bullet around it, and these were the two hemispheres of the human brain. So I said, that's a bullet going through somebody's brain. And the next thing that they showed me looked like, I did a lot of taxidermy when I was a kid, and it looked like when you crack the sternum of a raccoon and open it, and the viscera pours out, and the raccoon is like nailed to a board when you start to skin it. And I said, that's a raccoon with a cracked sternum. And each figure they showed me, I had this very, very violent imagery. And I was listening to myself. And I was saying, "Oh my God, you are a really angry person." And then, I realized, I got in fistfights all the time, and I did, I had, and I realized, and to me that was just fun. But I realized that's anger, and all these people had been able to see it in me. But I was blind to it myself and in total denial about it. And it made me understand that I needed other people to tell me what was wrong with me. And that, I was incapable of doing an honest, thorough self-examination without the help of somebody else.
And this was at what age?
This was when I was 28.
Oh, this is at the end, like when you were becoming sober. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, it taught me that important lesson. And I read this book by Jung, and I started breaking my day down and trying to each moment to make my bed in the morning, to put the water in the ice tray before I put it in the freezer. When I reach into the closet and pull out a pair of blue jeans and all those little wire hangers fall on the ground. Do I shut the door and say, that's somebody else's job, I'm too much of a big shot? Or do I go clean them up? Do I put the shopping cart where it's supposed to go?
That's a big one for me.
Yeah. So all of those things. And when you do a bunch of those things in a row, you maintain that posture of surrender. And you wake up every morning and say, reporting for duty, sir.
It's a choice.
And then try to, keep doing the next right thing. Oh, I started doing that before I finished the book. And then when the day I finished that book, I walked out on a volleyball field, and, I'd read this book about all these synchronicities, these weird things that happen. And I went out on a volleyball field. I was playing volleyball, and somebody hit the ball, on a very, very powerful punch. It went way up, and then it came down and hit the top of the post. And it made this errant flight back up again. And as it was relaunching, I said, so that everybody on the field heard me, I said, that ball is going to get hit by a Mack truck. I don't know why I said that. I have no idea, but everybody heard me say it. And the ball went up and landed on a chain link fence, and then it bounced on the other side, and it rolled down about 40 yards into a main thoroughfare, and this giant 18-wheel diesel with a little bulldog on the hood came by and hit it and popped it with just a resounding pop. And everybody looked at me for a second, or like, wow, how'd you do that?
The most random thing you could have said.
Yeah, the random thing I said. Oh, at that point, I had just finished this book about synchronicity, and I was like, okay, I can either just dismiss that the way that I would as a
Mm-hmm.
weird coincidence,
Mm-hmm.
or I can just say that, this is God's way of talking to me, and I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to accept the beauty of it, and accept, the personal um, interest that God would have for arranging that kind of very comical experience to
I wish there were this. I wish it had happened recently, and there's an iPhone video of it actually you saying it and actually
yeah.
it actually happening. I have to say family is so much to you. We know that publicly, and certainly you've shared that today. I'm going to be honest, and I was um, annoyed, upset with your family recently when in Philadelphia. It's one thing to vote for a different candidate. It's another thing for the 15 people in the Kennedy family to stand on a stage at a rally for Joe Biden when they know that
Six.
it was only six. Okay. For a huge portion, big names, people that mean something in your life from day one, to stand on that stage publicly and endorse Joe Biden instead of you. And even if they were going to vote for Joe Biden, to go to those lengths to support him. You've said, okay, I love my family. We all have different politics. We all have different opinions. I believe you. Was there not a part of you that thought, what the heck? Why, as my family members, go to that level to say, no, I am against my brother, my cousin, etc., and with this man? That annoyed me as a human.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. It wasn't a pleasant experience for me, but here's how I look at it, which is, first of all, when my family was raised in a milieu where we argue with each other, we differ on political issues. We were raised, we debated every night at the dinner table. My father orchestrated debates, and we were taught to disagree with each other with passion, with good information, but at the same time to love each other. So,
Sure.
I understand why people in my family are dismayed about me running. There's 5 members of my family that have jobs with the administration or rely on them for their work. President Biden is a long-term friend of me and my family. He has a statue of my father behind him in the Oval Office. So, I see why. And my family's tied in with the DNC.
I know.
They don't like what I'm doing. But, you asked a more personal question about how I internalize that. And what I believe is that any hardship that I encounter, I have to look at as a gift. Oh, I need to process everything as not as something that's meant to happen and that I'm meant to learn from it. And that I need to be grateful for it. That
So did it not hurt?
everything is teaching me something, and it's there to teach me something. So I don't spend any of my life in living in resentments. If you are resentful about somebody, it's like swallowing poison and hoping someone else will die. It's corrosive. And I am very disciplined about never going there.
Isn't there a difference between resentment and hurt?
Yeah, but again, my way of processing the experience of life is to say these things ultimately are gifts for me. And every person in my life who I've admired historically, from Charles Darwin to Alexander the Great to Lewis and Clark to Richard Speaks and any great Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Augustine. They all went through periods in their lives where they were disparaged by friends, by family, rejected by their communities. Winston Churchill, another great example. and that um, if you want to do something worthwhile in your life, that you have to expect that that's what you're going to go through. And the reason that not more people are doing what I'm doing is because if it were easy, they'd do it.
Yeah.
It's difficult, and that's part of the difficulty. But I'm very disciplined about not carrying that stuff around,
I think that's the right
either
word,
as hurt
discipline.
or as anger.
That's
And
beautiful.
if there's a microsecond in my head that says, "Oh, that's hurtful," I have now developed the ability to immediately change it and say that means it's good. If somebody listen, God is talking to you through every encounter that you have. Everybody that you meet is a messenger.
Absolutely.
And if somebody throws you the finger on a highway, you have to think to yourself, that's God. What does he want me to learn from this experience? What does he want me to do with this interaction? Does he want me to be kind? Does he want me to pray for that person?
So are you praying for your family? Are you like,
Yeah,
have
of
you had
course,
these, I
of
mean, I
course.
don't mean that literally, but as they are doing something that might be hurtful for a split second and then,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
And have you had conversations with them since?
Yes, I have.
And
I mean, one of the things is that several of them have said that, they've sent me notes saying we made sure not to criticize you. On an earlier iteration, some of them said a couple of things about me. But this time they said, and I told them I had dinner with my cousin Maria Shriver and one of my brothers who was there, Max, the other day. And I said, look, I really don't mind you guys doing this with, endorsing Biden, but I don't want you to be saying, and I don't think it makes you look good,
right.
to be saying, bad things about me. And it's hurtful to my children and, I think the whole family. So I think they made an effort not to do that. And several of them said to me, that they had used those moments with President Biden to ask him to provide me Secret Service protection. And, so I'm happy with that. I think that maybe he'll, reconsider his decision.
The fact that it's even a decision and it's gotten to this point is ridiculous, which to an outsider only says, okay, you're only doing that if you are threatened by that person. Otherwise, why wouldn't you do what is traditionally done for a presidential candidate? What do you think the chances are that he does reconsider? I mean, what did they say his reaction was? I'll think about it.
No, I didn't get that far with them. They just said we asked him. Oh, I don't know.
It's been asked before, and he has said.
Yeah, I mean, I've put 5 requests into
5.
Yeah, and I'm the first candidate in history that has requested Secret Service protection since my dad's death, which is when they gave it to everybody. And there's been 44. They have to give it to you 120 days out.
Okay.
But they've given it to 44 candidates, basically everybody. 200 days, 300 days. I think Obama got it 541 days out. Jesse Jackson, people with a tiny fraction of my polling. Shirley Chisholm, Pat Buchanan, got it a year out, et cetera. So I'm the first one that they've ever denied it to. That's
and
requested.
Did they ever give you a reason?
No.
What's your gut?
They'd say, I assume that it's a political decision. I know the Secret Service told them that I was at elevated risk. There was a 68-page report that was documenting all the death threats. The people who have 4 people have broken into my house since I declared one of them, a mentally ill person who got to the 2nd floor when my family was home. Another time, a man came with a lot of loaded pistols, shoulder holsters, and a backpack filled with weapons and magazines and fake U.S. Marshal ID and tried to get into my green room at a speech in Los Angeles with a lie. And he had fake federal enforcement agency ID. And luckily, one of my paid guys Gavin DeBecker looked at that badge and said that U.S. Marshal badge is a little too shiny, and they pulled him aside. And
so this is all being funded by you personally. Then all your security is from you.
Yeah, it's being funded by my campaign, but it's a lot of money. It's like $1 million a month. And you asked me why.
$1 million a month.
Yeah. Because you have to travel with people, and you have to pay airplane, and you have to pay you have cars, at both ends, and you have to have hotels, and it's a robust detail. So,
sure.
But you asked me why I thought they were doing it, and I don't know because I can't look into their heads, but I assume they've made a decision that they would rather me spend that $1 million on, protecting myself than on advertising or field organizing or whatever. So I think it's cynical. The troubling part of it is that it's really the first time since Nixon that a president has politicized the U.S. enforcement agencies. And we're seeing this not just with the Secret Service, but the CIA, the FBI, CISA, NIH, which were all, I won a lawsuit against President Biden called Kennedy versus Biden. I went to the U.S. Federal Court of Appeals that enjoined him from censoring me. And, 37 hours after he took the oath of office to uphold the Constitution, there were individuals in his White House were contacting Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Google, and asking them to take down my accounts. And threatening them that if they didn't do that, there's going to be antitrust issues and that they would lose their Section 230 immunity. So that has not been done before. And it's very, very dangerous precedent. And everybody, people might say, well, Joe Biden, he will never, he's a nice guy. He won't abuse those powers. But, once government takes a power, it's going to abuse it, and it will never relinquish it.
Well, and that's that's obviously one of the big problems. One of the reasons why you are here running a campaign and spending a minimum of $1 million of your own money and campaign money every single month because of what has happened with our government, and frankly, what has not happened. I just want to go through a couple of items real quick, a couple of these issues, because sometimes it depends on which medium people are reading, watching, listening to get the information. First and foremost right now, and I don't know, I guess it's debatable the order of importance, but what's happening in Israel and Palestine, and obviously atrocities on both sides. So if you're in office now, you're doing what with that real disaster that's happening now?
Well, I'm very anti-war, and I've been very outspoken about the Ukraine conflict, which I think is a conflict of choice, and it's a conflict we should have never gotten into. That as many as 600,000 Ukrainian kids have died unnecessarily, and that's been sold to the American public on a series of pretexts that are just not true.
Yeah.
And I'm not excusing Vladimir Putin's invasion, but Americans need to understand the provocation and the opportunities that we've had to settle that war. I'm anti-war, I think, but there are wars that are moral wars, and those are wars that I think in the last century, America, in a dozen wars that we've been into, only one of them would qualify as a moral war, and that would be World War II. And World War I was not. My grandfather protested it and lost a lot of his friendships and said at the outset, this is a war for bankers, it's a war for munitions manufacturers, for arms dealers, and it's a war to preserve the imperial nations and the colonists, the colonial powers. World War II was a just war. We were attacked. We were responding to an implacable enemy that was pledged to the destruction of Western civilization and had the ability to do it. I think Israel's war is a just war. It's a moral war. And I'm very, very pro-Palestinian. I'm heartbroken by the civilian deaths in Palestine, but I don't think we should be pointing at Israel. We should be pointing at Hamas.
At the border, what are you, if you're in office today? And again, it's inheriting things. Every person that
I would
comes
shut
in,
down the border.
you would have shut it down.
I would shut it down overnight. You can't have a country if it doesn't have secure borders.
Why has, in your mind, Joe Biden continuously said, I don't have the power to do that?
He has the power to do that.
Of course he does.
Yeah.
Why is he not, in your opinion?
Well, I don't answer the why questions that require me to look into other people's minds. Like I didn't answer, why is he denying me Secret Service protection? I'd say I could think of a reason he might.
I respect that.
So-
What might a reason be? Because again, as a normal citizen, I'm not a politician. You're looking from the outside, and I see us suffering.
Yeah, I mean, what he says is wrong, that he does have the power to stop it. He does not need legislation. He can stop it. There's a number of things that he can be doing right now that I will do immediately when I'm elected to stop it. And there's basically three things he needs to do. There are the infrastructure issues. They need to finish those last 27 holes in the wall. You don't need a wall from Brownsville, Texas, 2,200 miles to San Diego.
But basically what Trump was doing was the right thing. You'd agree?
Yeah. And I would revive the Migrant Protection Act. That is the rule that requires people seeking asylum who come in through Mexico to make their application from Mexico, process their claims there, and before they come through. And then also I'd end the catch and release program, and I'd reinstate the catch and return program. And then they also need personnel. They need enough Border Patrol. And they need asylum court judges. But we could end it. There's a lot of other things that we can do, but we could end it. If you ask me, what are the reasons that the administration is doing it, I would say the most parsimonious reason, I think, is just political pettiness, is that, I know that that's happening because there are these gaps in the fence, and there's huge piles, that were supposed to be completed, and there's huge piles of construction material next to them that has been now abandoned for 3.5 years. And it's a very easy thing to finish those fence lines. And the fence was called off the day that President Biden came in. They stopped construction. And then, Secretary Mayorkas has been, the Border Patrol, the head of the Border Patrol at that time, Chris Clem, has told me exactly what happened with his conversations with Mayorkas. And they were pleading with Mayorkas. Mayorkas finally came down, saw this tsuami of people coming through that I've witnessed now repeatedly. I've been down, every time I've been down there. And Mayorkas recognized, we got to finish the fences in these areas. But he said, I don't want to use Trump's material. And so they ordered new material, and it's much less robust.
I'm sure it was free. I'm sure it cost nothing.
No, of course. It costs tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars.
Sure.
And that's just pettiness, because he wanted a different color, and he wanted to show this is Biden's fence and this is Trump's fence, and it's not, it's not admirable behavior.
At the end of the day, I think that's the frustrating thing is Americans want someone who is in it for the right reason. And there's always going to be things and parts of things that are political, certainly. But at the end of the day, what's the right thing for the American people? And that is, you're saying, overnight, you could at least stop the chaos by closing the border immediately, if in office. Can you clarify, and forgive me for using that word, again, it depends on what you've read, what we've heard over the last, let's just say, year. Your stance on abortion is what?
I've been arguably one of the leading people in this country for medical freedom and for bodily autonomy.
Yes.
So, and I think with abortion, every abortion is a tragedy. Many of them leave permanent trauma on the woman. But I think ultimately, I don't trust government to have jurisdiction over people's bodies.
Mhm.
I think we need to leave it to the woman, her pastor, and to her spiritual advisors or her physician, whatever, to make those decisions. I have to say this: that I have a plan that we've published, which is called More Choice and Fewer Abortions. And, that plan, something like close to 60% of abortions are among women who make the decision for economic reasons. And I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that women who want to bring their babies to term and are scared of not being able to afford them, that is never a consideration.
There are so many. I love that you're doing. There's so many opportunities in Catholic Charities. I mean, there's so many opportunities for women to make other choices, and sometimes it's just about them knowing and just about the education part of it.
It's also about
but can I ask?
childcare, and it's
Of
about
course, but the finances always play a role in it, and you try to have a heart and not judge from afar because no one understands what it's like when you're in those shoes. Should there be a limit? Or you're saying all the way up through full term, a woman has a right to have an abortion?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any woman ever, ever in history has said, I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to get pregnant and carry that baby to 8 months of term, and then I'm going to terminate the pregnancy. I don't think anybody wants to do that. And
That has happened too many times to count, though, where these
I'm sure it has happened. I would say in almost all those cases, there's extenuating circumstances.
But who knows? But I mean, especially when there's drugs involved and people aren't thinking clearly, at the end of the day, it is happening.
What I'm saying is I don't think any woman sets out saying, I'm going to carry a baby for 8 months and abort him.
Sure, but they could change their mind at 8 months, and this is what
Exactly,
we've seen. So
and
should they be
when that
allowed to do it
happens-
full term?
Yeah. So again, I respect people who I think there's a very, very good argument, a compelling argument, that the state has a interest in protecting a fully formed fetus. I absolutely think that argument is very convincing. But again, I come down to the fact that I don't trust the state, and I think we need to trust the woman. And I don't think that that's a satisfactory outcome because there's always going to be instances where bad things happen.
Yes, we can't prevent
Either
that.
way, there's going to be bad things.
But so in other words, keeping it as is with Roe versus Wade having been overturned and leaving it up to the states to determine if and when a woman can have an abortion?
No, I wouldn't leave it to the states.
You wouldn't, right?
No, I would.
You would say completely. It's up to the
my
woman.
belief is we should leave it to the woman. We shouldn't have government involved,
even if it's full term.
Even if it's full term.
Okay, and I think that's what I wanted to clarify because there are especially people in the middle trying to determine which way we go, and some people are one topic voters, correct? But with this issue in particular, it's a tough one, and I know there's no simple answer. And as a Catholic, that definitely is something that is a concern with many practicing Catholics, that it would be okay to allow a woman to do that.
I don't think it's ever okay.
It would be allowed. It would be allowed.
I think we have to leave it to the woman rather than the state.
Okay.
So I think we should do everything in our power to make sure that never happens, and everything that we can do. And but I think ultimately, nobody sets out to do that, and there are always some kind of extenuating circumstances that would make a mother make that kind of choice, a terrible, terrible choice, which is, you can't overstate how bad that is. And I think, ultimately we have to trust women.
Mm-hmm. So of all of these issues, and there's so many, the number one issue for you right now, and this is the end of April, early May of 2024, as an American, not just a man who's running for president of the United States, it's the number one issue, the number one concern for you as an American?
I would say, the number one issue, I mean, unraveling the war machine, making sure our kids can take advantage of the economy, controlling AI, which I think is existential, dealing with the $34 trillion budget deficit. All of these are existential to me. The issue that floats to the very top is the chronic disease epidemic in our children. The fact that when my uncle was president, there was only 6% of American children had chronic disease, and today 60% do. And it's hard to find a child today who's not affected. It's almost impossible. And, when I was a kid, a typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his lifetime. And today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks in his office door is pre-diabetic or diabetic. Autism has gone from 1 in 10,000 in my generation today. 70-year-old men, 1 in 10,000 must have his full-blown autism. In my kids' generation, it's 1 in every 34, 1 in every 22 boys. And then the cost of that is $1 trillion a year. The cost of treating diabetes now bigger than our defense budget. And you add them all up, it's $4.3 trillion a year, 5 times our defense budget. We can't survive as a nation with this, and we're the only nation in the world that has anything like this.
Yeah.
And we're mass poisoning our children, and then the medical system is collapsing because of that. The budget is being drowned because of it,
I'm so grateful for you, obviously, your stance on COVID. And I know that that's one of the reasons why you said, let me go try to help because of what happened during the pandemic. And I'm so grateful for your stance. I got in trouble with Disney, my former employer, for saying, no, why are you mandating this? This is insanity. Maybe the silver lining to come from that disaster is that there are normal people like me who are questioning more and who have then dug deeper to see exactly what's going on and to see why these numbers are what they are, to see what's happening with big pharma. I sometimes, part of me, I have to be honest with you, doesn't have hope that this can be turned around because we're so far down that road. Why should I be hopeful if you're in office that this, first of all, a pandemic comes again, it'll be handled differently. I know you would handle that differently. But secondly, that there is hope, and we can end on this, that there is hope
if
for
I'm
parents.
elected, I will end the chronic disease epidemic.
How?
Not just slow it down, I'll end it. I mean, I've been litigating against these agencies, against NIH, CDC, FDA, EPA. I've probably sued them more than any other attorney in the country. They've become captured by the industries they're supposed to regulate. So they're run by pharmaceutical companies, and that's why we're having this problem. If they were doing real science, we wouldn't have this problem. If we knew where these diseases are coming from, we do. We know where they're coming from.
We do.
You don't have enough science to make a lawsuit on it. So you need about 15 or 20 studies that are epidemiological, bench studies, animal studies, observational studies, and then you can litigate on it. And let's say, take high fructose corn syrup. There's a huge cartel that is pushing that. Millions of farmers who have been made dependent upon, monoculture, GMO corn.
Mm-hmm.
The methane industry, all of these, there's Cargill and Monsanto and all of these big companies that finance Congress. It's very tough to fight that cartel, but you can do it if you have science. Because the lawyers then can sue and say, okay, these kids have juvenile diabetes, they have obesity. And one of the key contributing factors, as all this science shows, is high fructose corn syrup.
Mm-hmm.
They were never warned about it. They were told it was safe, and now
we're
we're going to
addicted.
sue them, and they're going to pay big time, and they're going to stop making it. And that's what I did with my team, with Monsanto, with Roundup. Everybody said, you'll never get rid of Roundup. Well, we got a $2.2 billion jury verdict and a $289 million jury verdict and an $89 million jury verdict. And Monsanto came to the table and said, we're going to take it out of home gardening products. You can do it, you can fix it, but you need to do real science. And
people,
NIH blocks that kind of science.
correct.
They will not let anybody do it. And NIH has a $42 billion budget. It distributes that money to 56,000 scientists all around, mainly universities. And they're supposed to be figuring out why are we so sick, but they don't. What they do is they develop drugs to treat the chronic disease epidemic, and they're all getting rich.
They're getting rich, and it's just like what happened with the vaccines. And therefore, then we what? We remain dependent upon them.
And they lie to us. They lie about it. And not only are they covering it up, not only are they making sure nobody studies the real etiology of these diseases, but they lie about the science.
And then won't even allow us to look at the science to then make educated decisions for ourselves and for our family members. So that's the thing, trust the science, but only when we tell you it's okay to trust the science.
I'm the only presidential candidate who is even talking about this, but I'm also the only one that can do anything because I know how these industries work. And you've done it,
and you've proven. And that's what I want to end on, because I hope that no matter what happens, you have 6 babies. They're always your baby, no matter how old they are, right? You have 6 children, and no matter what happens in November, no matter what happens for the rest of your life, you've done so much for so many. What do you hope your kids say to their grandkids someday about who you were?
That's not my business. What other people think or say about me is not my business. What my business is to keep doing the next right thing and, to do everything I can to win this battle, to make sure that our kids get their health back.
I understand that. I guess I look at, and my dad's my hero. He's 78 years old. He has 2 kinds of cancer. There's all the things. He's an Army officer. So many things. And at the end of the day, I'm so proud of him. I'll tell you later, but I'm so proud of what he's done for others. He was the first Black man to ever play varsity football at West Point. He went through so much in the civil rights era, all those things. And at the end of the day, that's great. And then there's Gary Steele, the father. And that to me matters. Not just what we accomplish and what our resume ends up being. Your resume is ridiculous. It's incredible. You've done more than majority of people can never even have dreamt of. But I imagine it's a little more important with your family and with your kids. So I respect that. I just feel like, my goodness, there's more to you than that. There's this and this beautiful family that you've created. And someday they will be saying, let me tell you what Grandpa used to do to me, I mean, I respect that part of you.
But I'm very proud of my family.
I know.
And I think, my kids are miracles because they all went through tough times. And, I'm very grateful to Cheryl, who, is the best human being I've ever met. And she is, she stepped in and filled a big vacuum in all of our lives. And, my kids have gone through tough stuff. And they've all turned into extraordinary, exceptional human beings. And they're, with every gift. And I'm very, very proud of them. And,
I just can only imagine how proud they are of you and what you're doing, because you don't have to do this right now. You don't. This is because you care about people that you'll never even meet. And I think that's probably not enough attention is focused on that from the human aspect of why you're doing this.
Well, I'm lucky because my kids are proud of me, and they tell me that all the time. I feel very, very fortunate.
It's a blessing, but you've created it too. You're just not going to pat yourself on the back for the kids. That's okay. I'll do it for you. Thank you.
Thank you
for taking the time. It means a lot. I think it's such a scary, confusing time right now for so many people. And as you know, a lot of people are like, I don't want to vote for Biden. I don't want to vote for Trump. Help me, someone more in the middle. And I'm just grateful for the time to share more than just what you believe in policy-wise. It means something to a lot of Americans.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
It's great to meet you. Can I end with this little game? I hope you like this. And if not, you can throw the cards at me, okay? This is our little creation. This is silly. It's time to play Who Wants to Be President of the United States. It's a game that I think you would qualify for. Okay, put these people in order for most lies that did damage to the population of the U.S. Anthony Fauci, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Tom Sandoval from Vanderpump Rules.
I wrote a book about Anthony Fauci, and I would say that his dishonesty probably did more to hurt the world and we had the highest death rate of any country in the world from COVID. We have 4.2% of the world's population, but we had 16% of the COVID deaths, and I would say that that's largely due to his bad leadership.
The man that we were told to trust. Thank you for that answer. If you win the presidency, let me rephrase. When you win the presidency, which of these will you do on day one? Storm the CDC, storm the FDA, storm the USDA, storm the NIH, close the border, finally get that well-deserved Secret Service protection. Those are your choices.
I would say all of the above.
All of the above. Can we do that all on day one?
Yeah, I'm going to go the first week. I'm going to make trips down to each of those agencies. USDA is a little harder because we need to get people in there, and that takes some time. But the other agencies, I know exactly what to do. At FDA, NIH, CDC, I know exactly what to do. I know the people who have to be moved, and I know the kind of pep talk that
pep talk. That's the nice way of putting that, right?
To give to.
Can I come? Can I just watch?
Yeah.
Fly on the wall. Who was the bigger threat to free speech? Facebook, Joe Biden, the FBI, CIA, or Disney?
I think the longer term threat probably comes from the intelligence community, from the CIA. And if you look, at the who's running a lot of the major publications now. The woman who just took over NPR has very, very clear links to the CIA. The people who are running Rolling Stone today, Noah Schlagman, people who run Daily Beast, Daily Kos, Salon.
It's out in the open. They're publicly acknowledging, well, we need to control this more. That's what's shocking to me, is that they're just out there. Okay, last one. Who is older? Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, or the Crypt Keeper?
I don't know who's the eldest. I think maybe Nancy Pelosi is, but I don't know. Or Mitch McConnell has got to be. I think between President Trump and President Biden's a little older.
Yes. You win because, yes, Nancy Pelosi. Although I thought Mitch just, he looks older and acts older. Nancy, 84, Mitch, 82, Joe Biden, 81, Donald Trump, 77. And then we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is barely 70 years old, but looks physically like you're 45. That's not right.
Thank you.
No, that's not fair, actually. That's BS that you're able to continue to do that. What's the workout regimen on the road?
I do exercise every day. I try to hike every morning and then spend 30 minutes at a gym every day.
Every day, no matter which city?
Yep.
Is there a key, like the 50 push-ups like my dad still tries to
I
do?
I have 5 different routines, and I just alternate every day.
Incredible. And then when do you have time for falconry? When do you have time for?
Falconry is, the season ends March 30th, and I don't.
Oh, the season, I didn't think.
Yeah, the hunting season.
Yeah.
It begins mid-September, but you can't really fly hawks until the leaves are off the trees. So that's usually, in the Northeast, that's mid-October.
Do you golf?
Do I golf? No.
Okay, so we won't be following you, from golf course to golf course when you should be, on Pennsylvania Avenue. But we might find you in the woods somewhere.
Yeah.
A little better. Okay. God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you.
You, Stacey.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And look, you got some new fuzzy socks,
Yeah.
which you hate. Thank you.